Someone was swimming in Laura Anderson's pool again. The crystal clear water rippled in ways it shouldn't have been rippling at 3 on a Wednesday afternoon, when both she and her husband were supposed to be at work. The realization struck her like a physical blow as she stood frozen at the kitchen window, her heavy briefcase still clutched in her manicured hand, her tired eyes narrowing with suspicion. This was the third time this month she had come home early to find evidence of unexpected pool activity, and a sickening weight settled in her stomach. Laura set her briefcase down on the granite countertop and moved silently toward the sliding glass door that opened onto their expansive backyard. The Anderson residence was the envy of their affluent neighborhood. 4,000 square feet of architectural brilliance nestled on a wooded acre lot, complete with the magazine-worthy swimming pool that had been Laura's one non-negotiable request when they purchased the property 7 years ago. Now, that same pool was telling her a story she wasn't ready to hear. Two damp towels lay carelessly draped over one of the lounge chairs, the expensive Egyptian cotton a visible darker shade from moisture. A half-empty wine glass sat abandoned on the poolside table. Laura's jaw tightened as she noted the second glass beside it. Lipstick smudged prominently along its rim, a bright red that wasn't hers. She wore only subtle rose tones, never red, never that desperate shade of attention-seeking crimson. For 6 weeks, she had been noticing the signs. Little things at first. Paul suddenly volunteering to maintain the pool chemistry when he'd never shown the slightest interest in home maintenance before, his late nights at the hospital becoming more frequent, yet the hospital administration sending their quarterly insurance update to Dr. and Mrs. Anderson showing fewer logged hours than the previous year. The mysterious calls he took in another room, his voice dropping to a whisper, the way his eyes no longer lingered on her when she dressed in the morning. Evidence, Laura whispered to herself, the lawyer in her automatically cataloging every detail. It's all about the evidence. She had built her reputation as one of the city's most formidable divorce attorneys on her ability to construct airtight cases. She knew better than anyone how the smallest oversight could collapse an entire claim. How many weeping women had sat across from her describing similar scenes? How many times had she counseled patience, strategy, documentation? And now here she was, staring at her own marital crime scene. Unbitanin. Laura walked to the pool's edge and crouched down, running her fingers through the water. It was still warm from the afternoon sun, but she could feel that it had been disturbed recently. She glanced at her watch, 3:17. Paul should be in surgery until at least 6 hours. He had texted her that morning major valve replacement today. Don't wait up for dinner. She stood and smoothed her charcoal pencil skirt, a habit from her courtroom days when composure was as much a weapon as legal precedent. With precise, deliberate movements, she collected both wine glasses, handling them carefully by their stems. Inside the house, she placed them in a plastic bag and tucked them away in her home office safe behind her law degree from Yale. Fingerprints, DNA. The lawyer in her knew they might become important. In the master bathroom, Laura noticed more evidence. The shower door slightly ajar, water droplets still clinging to the glass. Paul was meticulous about closing it fully. She inspected the drain and found several strands of long blonde hair tangled around the metal grate. Her own hair was chestnut brown. The blonde strands seemed to mock her, coiled there like venomous snakes. She collected these, too, placing them in another evidence bag. That night, when Paul returned home shortly after 11th Yoren, Laura was sitting in the living room reviewing case files. She looked up and studied her husband of 7 years, searching for visible evidence of his betrayal. He was still handsome in the way that had first attracted her, tall, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than aging. His hands, those surgeon's hands that had once traced every inch of her body with reverence, now hung awkwardly at his sides. "Tough surgery?" she asked, her voice pleasantly neutral. "The toughest," he sighed, loosening his tie. "Had to repair a tear we didn't anticipate." Hmm, Laura nodded, noting the way he avoided direct eye contact. "I'm beat. Laura, I think I'll shower and head straight to bed." Laura nodded, keeping her expression carefully neutral. "Of course. Big day tomorrow. The Wilson deposition for me?" "Right, right," he mumbled, already heading up the stairs. "Good luck with that." She watched him climb the stairs, her mind already assembling a timeline. In the past 3 months, Paul had developed a sudden interest in their pool. He'd purchased expensive new chemicals and equipment, reading up on maintenance procedures with an enthusiasm that had seemed touching at the time. "I want to take some of the household burden off you," he'd explained, kissing her forehead. "You work too hard." Now, the memory of that kiss felt like acid on her skin. 4 years ago, things had begun to change between them. Laura's law firm had taken on several high-profile divorce cases, demanding more of her time and attention. Meanwhile, Paul had been passed over for chief of cardiology, a disappointment he'd never fully recovered from. They'd grown distant, their conversations reduced to scheduling and household management. They still shared a bed, but intimacy had become routine, perfunctory. Laura had suggested counseling twice. Paul had agreed but somehow always found reasons to reschedule. Eventually, she'd stopped asking, throwing herself deeper into her work. Perhaps, she now realized, that had been her first mistake. The next morning, Laura left for work at her usual time, but drove around the block and parked on a side street with a clear view of their driveway. She waited, her heartbeat echoing in her ears, telling herself this was ridiculous, paranoid, beneath her. At 9:32, a red sports car pulled into their driveway. A woman emerged, young, blonde, wearing designer athletic wear that showcased a body clearly sculpted through hours of dedicated training. She punched a code into the front gate and sauntered up the walkway as if she belonged there. Laura felt oddly calm as she watched the scene unfold. The numbness that settled over her was familiar, the same detachment she accessed during difficult trials. She took several photos with her phone, carefully documenting the timestamps. Then she started her car and drove to her office, her mind already spinning with calculations more complex than any legal strategy she'd ever devised. At her law firm, Martinez and Anderson, Laura closed her office door and called her investigator, a former police detective who now worked exclusively for her practice. "I need surveillance on my house," she said without preamble when he answered. "Specifically the pool area. Cameras, audio if possible. And I need it today while I'm at the office and my husband's at the hospital." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your house, Mrs. Anderson." "Yes. Frank, my house." Her voice didn't waver. "I also need a complete background check on someone. I'll send you the details and the photos I took this morning." That afternoon, Frank Rodriguez installed tiny cameras throughout the property while Laura sat through meetings and client consultations, her professional mask never slipping. By evening, she could access the feeds remotely through a secure app on her phone. She didn't check it that night, not wanting to see what might be happening in her own bedroom. Some evidence could wait. For 2 weeks, Laura gathered information methodically. The blonde woman, identified by her investigator as Vanessa Miller, a personal trainer at the exclusive health club where Paul had recently started working out, visited their home 3 to 4 times a week, always during the day when Laura was supposedly at work. The cameras captured everything: their poolside trysts, their showers together in the cabana bathroom, their bold use of the master bedroom. The betrayal was total. But Laura remained focused on her objective. This wasn't about heartbreak. This was about justice. And justice required strategy, patience, and most importantly, The perfect timing. One Tuesday morning, Laura called her best friend and law partner, Sophia Martinez. "I need to talk to you about something personal," Laura said, her voice steady. "I need your complete discretion." 3 hours later, they sat in Laura's office with the door locked and the blinds drawn. Laura played selected clips from the surveillance footage, her face impassive as Sophia's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, Laura," Sophia whispered. "I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" Laura smiled thinly. "What I do best, build an airtight case, wait for the perfect moment, and then," she paused, tapping her French manicured nail against her desk, "deliver a verdict they'll never forget." That evening, as Laura researched specialty aquatic supply stores on her laptop, a plan began to form. One that would require precise timing, unwavering nerve, and a very specific kind of surprise for the woman who thought she could swim in Laura Anderson's pool. In bed that night, Laura lay awake beside Paul, studying his profile in the dim light filtering through the curtains. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of supporting his career, attending hospital fundraisers, hosting dinner parties for his colleagues, adjusting her schedule around his surgical calendar. 7 years of building a life that he had carelessly shattered for the excitement of a younger woman. Anger burned in her chest, but beneath it lurked something deeper, more painful, the question of what she might have done differently. Had she been too absorbed in her cases, too critical of his setbacks, too absent even when present? She pushed these thoughts away. Self-doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Whatever their problems had been, Paul had made a choice that would now have consequences. The next day at work, Laura found herself distracted during a client meeting. The woman across from her was describing her husband's affair with his secretary, a story so cliched it would have been laughable if not for the raw pain in the woman's eyes. "I just want him to hurt like I'm hurting," the client said, twisting a tissue between her fingers. "I want to take everything." Laura had given this speech hundreds of times. "The court isn't interested in punishment, Mrs. Daniels. We need to focus on equitable distribution of assets, not revenge." But today, the words stuck in her throat. Wasn't she planning her own revenge? Wasn't she using her professional knowledge to orchestrate something far more calculated than what this tearful woman could imagine? "Mrs. Anderson." The client was looking at her expectantly. Laura cleared her throat. "Let's focus on protecting your interests. Mrs. Daniels." "Document everything, follow my advice to the letter, and I promise you'll walk away with what you deserve." What people deserved. That was the question haunting her now. Thursday afternoons had become Vanessa's favorite pool day. Laura had tracked the pattern carefully through her surveillance footage. Paul would leave for the hospital by 7:15, and by 9:00, the blonde personal trainer would saunter through the front gate as if she owned the place. She always arrived in her flashy red convertible, always wearing oversized designer sunglasses, and always with that irritating confidence of someone who believed she was entitled to take whatever she wanted. Laura decided it was time to understand the enemy. Using the investigative report from Frank Rodriguez, Laura pieced together Vanessa Miller's life. 26 years old, graduated from State University with a degree in exercise physiology. Before becoming a personal trainer at Elite Fitness, she had worked briefly as an aquatic rehabilitation specialist at a physical therapy center. That detail caught Laura's attention. Vanessa knew about water therapy, swimming techniques for injury recovery, and almost certainly how to recognize common water-dwelling creatures. Useful information for what Laura had planned. The report also revealed that Vanessa had a pattern of relationships with wealthy, married men. Before Paul, there had been a real estate developer who had bought her the red convertible. Before that, a finance executive who had paid for her luxury apartment. Laura stared at the photograph of Vanessa that Frank had included in his report. Young, undeniably beautiful, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the effects she had on men. Laura didn't hate her for her beauty or her youth. She hated her for her entitlement for walking into another woman's home and helping herself to another woman's life as if it were a buffet laid out for her pleasure. That evening, Laura set a test in motion. She knew from the surveillance footage that Vanessa was expected at their house the next day. Instead of going to work, Laura parked down the street and waited, just as she had that first day. She needed to see it with her own eyes, not through the lens of a hidden camera. At precisely 9:07 a.m., the red convertible pulled into the driveway. Vanessa emerged, looking like she'd stepped out of a fitness magazine in her matching blue yoga set. Laura watched as she confidently entered the gate code, a code only she and Paul should have known, and disappeared into the house. Laura waited, counting the minutes, feeling a strange detachment as she imagined what Vanessa was doing inside her home. At 9:23, Vanessa reappeared on the back patio, now wearing a tiny bikini that would have cost half a week's salary for most people. She laid out a towel, one of Laura's expensive Turkish cotton towels, on a lounge chair, poured herself a glass of champagne from the bottle Paul kept chilled in the outdoor refrigerator, and settled in to sunbathe. The casual ownership of it all made Laura's blood boil. This wasn't just an affair happening in hotel rooms or the back of Paul's car. This was a complete invasion, a colonization of her space, her life. After 15 minutes of sunbathing, Vanessa slipped into the pool, swimming lazy laps with practiced grace. Laura had to admit she moved beautifully in the water, like she belonged there, and that was precisely the problem. Laura had seen enough. She started her car and drove straight to her law office, where Sophia was waiting for her. "You were right," Laura said as she closed Sophia's office door behind her. "She's using the house like it's hers. She knows the security code, helps herself to our champagne, uses our towels. She's even wearing my sunglasses." Sophia's expression hardened. "The audacity. What's your plan?" "I'm thinking 3 phases," Laura replied, sitting down across from her friend. "First, discomfort, then fear, finally, complete loss. For Paul, for both of them, but in different ways." Sophia leaned forward, concern in her dark eyes. "Laura, I understand the impulse. God knows I'd want blood if I were in your shoes. But you're one of the most respected attorneys in this city. You can't risk your reputation on petty revenge." "It won't be petty," Laura said quietly, "and it won't be illegal. I just need to borrow your sharp legal mind to make sure of that." After a moment, Sophia nodded. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Laura outlined her plan while Sophia took notes, occasionally suggesting refinements or raising concerns. By the time they finished, they had constructed a strategy that was both emotionally satisfying and legally sound. "What about your heart in all this?" Sophia asked as Laura prepared to leave. "Are you sure you're ready for what this will do to you?" "To your marriage?" Laura paused at the door. "My marriage is already dead. Paul killed it. I'm just performing the autopsy and collecting damages." But later that night, alone in her car outside a specialty pet store that dealt in exotic reptiles, Laura allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief. 7 years. 7 years of building a life that now lay in ruins around her. She had wanted children with Paul, had delayed at his request so they could establish their careers first, had finally been ready to start trying just as the signs of his infidelity began to appear. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel, tears sliding down her cheeks, the first she had allowed herself since discovering the lipstick-stained wine glass. She cried not just for the betrayal, but for the death of a future she had planned so carefully. By the time she straightened up and wiped her eyes, a cold resolve had settled over her. She had given this marriage everything. Now it would give something back justice. On Friday morning, Laura woke early, feeling strangely energized despite having slept only a few hours. She showered and dressed with particular care, selecting a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored navy pants that projected confident elegance. Paul was already in the kitchen when she came downstairs, preparing his usual morning protein shake before heading to the hospital. He looked up and smiled a smile that once would have warmed her, but now seemed merely a reflex, empty of genuine feeling. "You look nice," he commented, his eyes skimming over her outfit before returning to his shake. "Big case today. Meeting with Judge Harris," Laura replied, pouring herself coffee. "He's mentoring some of the younger associates." "Ah," Paul nodded, clearly uninterested. "I've got back-to-back surgeries until 6, then a department meeting. Don't wait up." Laura nodded, sipping her coffee as she watched him gulp down his shake. Another lie. The surveillance footage showed that Thursdays and Fridays were when Paul and Vanessa usually met at the Westlake Hotel after she finished her afternoon swim. They would dine at the hotel restaurant, then book a room for several hours before Paul would come home, claiming exhaustion from hospital duties. "Have a good day, then," she said mildly as he rinsed his glass. Paul pressed a quick, dry kiss to her cheek, the kind of perfunctory gesture that had replaced genuine affection, and headed for the door. Laura waited until she heard his car start before pulling out her phone. "Frank, I need you to follow my husband today. I want to know everywhere he goes, who he meets, how long he stays. Yes, including the hospital. I have reason to believe he's falsifying his work hours." This was a new angle she had been considering, not just the emotional betrayal of the affair, but the potential financial misconduct it might be concealing. If Paul was claiming to be at work while actually spending time with Vanessa, what else might he be lying about after ending the call with Frank? Laura made another call, this time to her old mentor and friend, Judge Benjamin Harris, not in his official capacity, but as someone who had seen hundreds of divorce cases and might offer personal guidance. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe far from both the courthouse and her law office. "I need your advice, Benjamin," she said after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "Not as a judge, but as someone who's seen hundreds of divorce cases." Benjamin's wise eyes studied her face. "I was wondering when you might come to me about Paul," he said gently. "I've noticed things haven't seemed right between you two at the last few Bar Association dinners." Laura wasn't surprised by his perception. It was one of the qualities that made him such an effective judge. "He's having an affair," she stated flatly. "I have irrefutable evidence." Benjamin nodded slowly. "And you're building a case, aren't you? Not just for divorce, but for something more." "You know me too well," Laura smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I want him to lose everything, not just me, but everything he values, his reputation, his standing in the community, his financial security." "Be careful, Laura," Benjamin warned. "Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it can consume you. I've seen it happen to too many people." "This isn't just about revenge," Laura replied, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "It's about justice. He betrayed everything we built together. He brought another woman into our home, into our bed. He deserves consequences." Benjamin sighed. "Just remember who you are. You're one of the finest attorneys I've ever known. But more importantly, you're a person of integrity. Don't lose that in pursuit of justice." Laura considered his words as she drove back to her office. Integrity. It had always been her North Star, the principle that guided both her professional and personal life. But integrity didn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes it meant standing up for yourself in ways that others might not understand. When she arrived at the office, She found an email from Frank with an extensive background report on Vanessa Miller. As Laura scrolled through the information, a slow smile spread across her face. There, buried in the employment history section, was exactly the kind of detail she needed for the next phase of her plan. Before becoming a personal trainer, Vanessa had worked briefly as an aquatic rehabilitation specialist. She knew about water therapy, swimming techniques for injury recovery, and almost certainly how to recognize common water-dwelling creatures. The confirmation made Laura's smile widen. Vanessa's horrified reaction to what Laura had planned would be genuine. Laura picked up her phone and called a specialty aquarium supplier in the next county. Yes, she said when they answered. I'd like to place an order for delivery next Thursday afternoon. After finishing the call, Laura leaned back in her chair, mentally reviewing the phases of her plan. Phase 1 disrupt Vanessa's comfortable invasion of their home, starting with the pool. Phase 2 escalate to create genuine fear and discomfort. Phase 3 the final confrontation and legal consequences. Each phase had been meticulously planned to build upon the last, creating a crescendo of consequences that would leave both Paul and Vanessa reeling. It wasn't just about revenge, though. Laura couldn't deny the satisfaction she anticipated, but about reclaiming what was rightfully hers, her dignity, her home, her future. As she prepared to leave the office that evening, Laura received a text from Frank, found something interesting in husband's financial records. Can meet tonight. Laura's pulse quickened. My office, 8 p.m., she replied. When Frank arrived, he carried a thick folder and wore the expression of someone who had discovered something significant. You were right to dig deeper, he said without preamble, laying out several bank statements on her desk. Dr. Anderson has been moving money around? Laura examined the documents, her trained eye quickly spotting the pattern. Over the past 6 months, Paul had been transferring small amounts $5,000 here, 7,500s there from their joint accounts to a private account she hadn't known existed. How much total, she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the fresh betrayal burning in her chest. Just over $200,000, Frank replied. And there's more. He's made several large purchases that don't appear on your joint credit cards. He slid across a jewelry store receipt for a diamond bracelet worth $18,000. This wasn't a gift for you. I'm guessing. Laura shook her head, thinking of the delicate tennis bracelet she'd spotted on Vanessa's wrist in the surveillance footage. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in Paul's coffin. There's one more thing, Frank said, hesitation evident in his voice. It seems Dr. Anderson has been looking into real estate in Aspen, specifically vacation properties. Laura's jaw tightened. They had talked about buying a vacation home for years, but had always decided to prioritize their retirement savings instead. Now Paul was looking at properties on his own, presumably for himself and his young lover. Thank you, Frank, Laura said, her resolve hardening further. This changes things. Indeed it did. What she had planned as a personally satisfying revenge now had legal teeth. Paul wasn't just emotionally betraying her, he was financially betraying her as well. In the state's equitable distribution laws, hiding assets during a divorce was a serious offense that judges viewed harshly. Laura gathered the financial documents carefully, adding them to her growing file of evidence. This was no longer just about teaching Paul and Vanessa a lesson. This was about protecting what was rightfully hers. As she drove home that night, Laura found herself mentally revising her strategy. The pool surprises would proceed as planned. She had already invested in that aspect of her revenge. And frankly, she still wanted the satisfaction of witnessing Vanessa's terror. But now she would also set in motion a more comprehensive legal strategy, one that would ensure Paul lost far more than just his mistress. Laura Anderson had always prided herself on being a consummate professional, someone who could separate emotion from strategy. But as she pulled into her driveway and stared at the house she had made into a home that had been invaded and defiled, she allowed herself to embrace the cold, clarifying anger that had been building for weeks. Paul Anderson had made the worst mistake of his life. He had betrayed a woman who destroyed people in court for a living, and he was about to discover exactly what that meant. Wednesday evening arrived with the promise of retribution. Laura sat at her kitchen table, carefully reviewing the final details of her plan while sipping a glass of the expensive Cabernet Paul had bought for their anniversary last year, an anniversary he had celebrated with performative enthusiasm, before disappearing to the hospital for an emergency that her surveillance now proved had been Vanessa waiting in a hotel room. Outside, twilight settled over the neighborhood, painting her magazine-worthy pool in shades of deep blue. Tomorrow, that pristine water would become the stage for the first act in her carefully orchestrated drama. Her phone buzzed with a text from the specialty aquatic store delivery confirmed for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Laura smiled. Perfect timing. According to her surveillance data, Vanessa typically arrived around noon on Thursdays, giving Laura ample time to prepare her surprise. She opened her laptop and checked the feeds from her hidden cameras one more time. The house was empty now. Paul was at a medical conference that Frank had confirmed was actually a romantic dinner with Vanessa at an upscale restaurant 30 miles away. They would likely end up at their usual hotel afterward, meaning Paul wouldn't return until late. No chance of him discovering what she had planned for his pool. Laura closed her laptop and moved to the living room, where she had laid out the items she would need tomorrow: a large black tarp, heavy decorative stones to secure it, and thick rubber gloves to handle her special guests. Everything was in place. As she prepared for bed that night, Laura caught herself studying her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 38, she was still beautiful, her chestnut hair falling in soft waves around a face that had matured gracefully. Her figure toned from regular workouts, squeezed between client meetings and court appearances. Paul had once said he could drown in her dark eyes. What had changed? When had she become invisible to him? Or had she always been just a placeholder, a suitable wife for an ambitious surgeon until something younger and shinier came along? Laura shook her head, banishing the self-doubt. This wasn't about her not being enough. This was about Paul's character, his weakness, his selfishness, his betrayal. She wouldn't internalize his failures. She slept soundly that night, dreamless and determined. The delivery truck arrived precisely at 10 a.m. the next day. Laura, dressed in casual clothes she wouldn't mind discarding if necessary, greeted the delivery man with a pleasant smile. "Special order for Mrs. Anderson," he said, handing her a clipboard to sign while eyeing the large containers in the back of his truck. "Mind if I ask what these are for? Research for a client's case?" Laura replied smoothly. "They're harmless. I've been assured." The young man nodded, clearly not entirely convinced, but professional enough not to pry further. Together they unloaded several containers filled with water and small wriggling creatures, tadpoles. Hundreds of them, dark and primitive with their bulbous heads and whip-like tails. "American bullfrog tadpoles," the delivery man explained, repeating what the aquatic specialist had told her when she placed the order. "They'll grow fast in the right conditions. The adults can get as big as 8 inches and weigh up to 2 pounds. "Perfect," Laura said, signing the delivery form with a steady hand. After the truck departed, she moved the containers to the pool area and began her work. One by one, she released the tadpoles into the pool, watching as they dispersed quickly through the crystal-clear water. Next came 2 adult bullfrogs, enormous specimens that the store had been using as breeders. They were impressively ugly with bulging eyes and powerful back legs. She placed them gently into the water at opposite ends of the pool. "You two are my star performers," she whispered as they kicked powerfully away from her hands. "Make me proud." After the pool had been thoroughly populated, Laura carefully spread the black tarp over the entire surface, securing it around the edges with heavy decorative stones. To anyone glancing out the windows, it would appear that the pool was simply covered for maintenance. Nothing suspicious about that. She checked her watch, 11:47, plenty of time to shower, change, and prepare for her next move. Paul would be attending a medical dinner tonight, or so he claimed. The surveillance footage from previous Thursdays suggested he would actually be meeting Vanessa at a hotel downtown after she finished her afternoon swim in Laura's pool. Today's alteration to their routine would require them to adjust their plans. Laura smiled at the thought as she headed inside. Let them scramble. At 12:35, Laura received a text from Frank. Subject heading your way. ETA 10 minutes. Vanessa had taken the bait. Right on schedule. Laura positioned herself in the guest bedroom that overlooked the driveway, watching as Vanessa's red convertible pulled in at precisely 12:45. The blonde woman emerged looking particularly pleased with herself today, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and carrying a large tote bag emblazoned with an exclusive brand logo. She sauntered to the front door, punching in the security code with the casual entitlement that made Laura's blood boil. Through her surveillance app, Laura watched as Vanessa entered and moved through the house, calling out softly, "Paul, are you here early?" When no answer came, she made her way to the kitchen, helping herself to a glass of champagne from the refrigerator. She stood by the window, looking out at the covered pool with obvious confusion. "What the hell?" Laura heard her mutter through the app's audio. Vanessa set down her glass and bag on one of the kitchen counters and moved toward the patio doors. Laura shifted to another camera view, watching as the personal trainer stepped outside and approached the pool's edge. She began to remove the heavy stones one by one, gradually pulling back the tarp to reveal the water beneath. Laura held her breath, waiting. The personal trainer had uncovered about a quarter of the pool when she paused, leaning forward to peer more closely at the water. Laura could see the exact moment when Vanessa noticed the first tadpole swimming near the surface, the slight tilt of her head, the confused narrowing of her eyes. Vanessa knelt down and continued pulling the tarp back, revealing more of the pool and its new inhabitants. As more tadpoles came into view, a look of disgusted bewilderment crossed her face. She stood abruptly and took several steps backward, nearly tripping over a lounge chair. Just then, one of the adult bullfrogs surfaced with a splash, its massive body breaking the water tension before diving back down. Vanessa screamed, a high, startled sound that echoed across the yard. "Oh my God, what the fuck is that?" She scrambled further away from the pool edge, knocking over a potted plant in the process. It was exactly the reaction Laura had hoped for. She remained hidden in the guest room, recording everything as Vanessa frantically pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Even from inside, Laura could hear the panicked edge in the younger woman's voice. "Paul, Paul, there's something wrong with the pool. It's full of, I don't know, tadpoles or something. And there are these huge frog things swimming around. Did you do this?" A pause. "No, I'm not kidding. It's disgusting. What should I do?" Laura couldn't hear Paul's response, but she could see Vanessa becoming increasingly agitated. "Well, I can't swim in this. It's completely gross." "Fine, I'll meet you there instead. But you need to call someone to fix this. It's like a swamp in there." Vanessa gathered her things hurriedly, casting one last revolted glance at the pool before rushing back through the house. Laura waited until she heard the front door slam and the sports car engine start before she emerged from her hiding place. She walked calmly to the pool and surveyed her handiwork. The tadpoles darted around like living shadows in the clear water, while one of the bullfrogs perched on the first step of the pool stairs, regarding her with solemn, protruding eyes. Phase 1 complete, she told it quietly. That evening, Laura drove to the downtown hotel where she knew Paul and Vanessa would be meeting. She parked across the street and waited, watching as her husband arrived in his luxury sedan 30 minutes after Vanessa's red convertible had pulled into the valet line. Laura took photographs, documenting everything with the methodical precision that had made her such a formidable attorney. She wasn't following them out of jealousy or heartbreak. She was gathering evidence for the case. She was building a case that would eventually leave Paul with nothing. As she sat in her car watching the hotel entrance, her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Everything go as planned." Laura typed back, "Perfect first act." The audience was suitably horrified. By the time Laura returned home, Paul had texted that he was staying late at the hospital to monitor a critical patient, another lie to add to the growing collection. Laura didn't bother responding. Instead, she called the pool service company and scheduled them to come first thing in the morning to remove her amphibian performers and restore the pool to its pristine condition. The tadpoles and frogs would be safely relocated to a local nature center. Laura had no desire to harm innocent creatures, even those serving as instruments of her revenge. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. As Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, Laura sipped her coffee on the patio, gazing at her now immaculate pool. The pool service had worked efficiently the day before, removing all traces of her amphibian guests and balancing the water chemistry to perfection. The surface gleamed in the morning light, placid and inviting the perfect canvas for phase 2 of her plan. Paul had returned home late the previous night, slipping into bed beside her with exaggerated care, clearly assuming she was asleep. She had maintained the pretense, keeping her breathing deep and even as he settled beside her, the scent of hotel soap and expensive perfume clinging to his skin despite his obvious attempt to shower it away. Now he sat across from her at the patio table, scrolling through his phone while absently eating the breakfast she had prepared, a peace offering. He probably thought her way of apologizing for questioning his late nights. In reality, Laura was simply maintaining normalcy, giving him no reason to suspect what she had set in motion. "Any plans today?" she asked casually, turning a page in the newspaper she wasn't actually reading. Paul glanced up, seemingly relieved by her friendly tone. "Thought I'd go for a run, then catch up on some journal articles. You, meeting Sophia for lunch, then errands." The lunch was real, the errands were not. She would actually be visiting her second specialty animal supplier, this one located in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. "Sounds nice," Paul said, attention already back on his phone. "Oh, by the way, there might be something wrong with the pool filter. I noticed some debris yesterday." Laura hid her smile behind her coffee cup. "Really? That's odd. I just had the pool service out yesterday for the regular maintenance. They didn't mention any problems." Paul frowned slightly. "Pool service, I don't remember scheduling them." "I took care of it," Laura said smoothly. "You've been so busy lately. I didn't want to bother you with household details." "Oh, well, thanks." He looked momentarily confused, then shrugged it off. "Anyway, if you notice anything strange with the water, let me know. I can call someone." "Of course," Laura agreed pleasantly, suppressing the urge to laugh at the irony. If only he knew what strange things would soon be appearing in their pool again. Later that afternoon, Laura met with her second specialty supplier, a man who raised exotic reptiles for collectors and educational programs. "You sure about this, ma'am?" he asked as they loaded several containers into the trunk of her car. "These ain't dangerous, but they sure can give folks a scare." "I'm sure," Laura replied, handing him an envelope of cash. It's for an educational demonstration. The man shrugged, clearly not entirely convinced, but unwilling to turn down the generous payment. Your call. Just remember, they need to be kept cool until they're in water, and they shouldn't be left in chlorinated water for more than a few hours. I understand. They'll be relocated to a nature sanctuary tomorrow. On Sunday, Paul was called in for an emergency surgery, a genuine one this time. According to Frank's confirmation with the hospital, it provided Laura with the perfect opportunity to prepare phase 2 of her plan. From the containers, she carefully transferred several small water snakes into a temporary habitat she'd set up in the garage. They weren't venomous. She had no desire to actually harm anyone, but their dark, sinuous bodies and quick movements would certainly create the impression of danger. Next came two small alligator snapping turtles, prehistoric-looking creatures with spiked shells and powerful beaks. The reptile specialist had assured her they were juvenile specimens, only about 10 inches long, but their prehistoric appearance made them look far more formidable than they actually were. The final touch was a pair of large South American Cayman's lizards that resembled miniature alligators, about 2 feet in length. They blinked their ancient eyes at her as she transferred them from their travel containers to a holding pen. "You're the stars of today's show," she told them softly. "Make it convincing." After securing the rest of her supplies in the garage, Laura went inside to change. She selected a casual but elegant outfit, linen pants and a silk blouse, and styled her hair carefully. Then she called Sophia. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Sophia asked. "All set," Laura confirmed. "Are you prepared for your part?" "Absolutely." "I'll call Paul at exactly 3:15 with the emergency consultation request. That should get him to the office for at least an hour." "Perfect. That gives me plenty of time." Monday arrived with the promise of another scorching summer day, ideal pool weather. Laura went through her morning routine as usual, leaving the house at her normal time, but driving only as far as a coffee shop several blocks away. There, she waited until she saw Paul's car pass on his way to the hospital before doubling back home. By 2:30, Laura began the process of introducing her new aquatic performers to the pool. The water snakes went in first, immediately diving beneath the surface and disappearing into the depths. The snapping turtles followed, their prehistoric forms sinking quickly to the bottom, where they settled into the shadows. Finally, she carefully placed the caimans into the shallow end, where they floated ominously, only their eyes and the ridges of their backs visible above the waterline. With all performers in place, Laura partially covered the pool with the tarp again, leaving about a third of the water exposed enough for Vanessa to see that the pool was usable, but not enough to reveal its new inhabitants immediately. At precisely 3:15, Laura received a text from Sophia Call made. "He's on his way to the office." 15 minutes later, right on schedule, the red convertible pulled into the driveway. Laura positioned herself in the kitchen where she could see the pool area through the window while remaining hidden from view. Her phone was set to record, capturing everything. Vanessa entered the house using the code, dropping her designer bag on the entryway table with the casual entitlement that made Laura's blood boil. Today, the personal trainer wore a tiny white bikini under a transparent mesh cover-up, her blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail. Through the open window, Laura could hear her on the phone, presumably with Paul. "I just got here." "Yes, the pool looks normal again. Of course I'll wait for you, but I'm going for a swim first. It's 92 degrees out here." Vanessa ended the call and made her way to the patio, stopping to pour herself a glass of expensive champagne from the bottle Paul kept chilled in the wet bar refrigerator. She set her glass on the table beside a lounge chair and approached the pool, beginning to remove the tarp. Laura held her breath as Vanessa pulled back the heavy black covering, revealing more and more of the water beneath. The personal trainer seemed pleased to see the pool looking clean again, completely unaware of what lurked beneath the surface. Vanessa removed her cover-up and dipped one manicured toe into the water, testing the temperature. Finding it satisfactory, she descended the steps into the shallow end, submerging herself to the waist. The reaction was not immediate. The caimans, disturbed by the movement, had retreated to the middle section of the pool. The water snakes remained hidden, and the snapping turtles were still settled at the bottom. For a moment, Laura worried her plan might fail. Then Vanessa pushed off from the steps and began to swim toward the deeper end with confident strokes. As she passed the halfway point of the pool, one of the caimans suddenly surfaced directly in her path. The scream that erupted from Vanessa's throat was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. She flailed backward, splashing wildly, only to feel something brush against her leg underwater. Another shriek tore from her as she caught sight of one of the water snakes gliding past. "Oh my God, help! There's something in here!" Vanessa thrashed toward the pool steps, her athletic prowess forgotten in her panic. As she scrambled to exit the water, one of the snapping turtles, disturbed by the commotion, rose from the bottom and surfaced nearby with its beak open. The personal trainer practically levitated out of the pool, her face contorted with horror. She collapsed onto the concrete deck, gasping and sobbing, her perfect body soaking wet and trembling. "Snakes? There are fucking alligators in the pool!" she screamed to no one in particular, scrambling backward on the pool deck, her eyes wild with terror. Laura waited, watching as Vanessa frantically gathered her things, not even bothering to dry off or change. The younger woman was openly crying now, fumbling with her phone as she tried to call Paul again. Paul, you won't believe this. There are reptiles in your pool. Actual snakes and alligators. This is insane. Someone is doing this on purpose." There was a pause as she listened to whatever Paul was saying on the other end. "No, I am not overreacting. There are literally alligators swimming around in there. I could have been killed." Another pause. "I don't care about your stupid meeting. This is serious. Someone is targeting your house." Vanessa ended the call and fled, leaving wet footprints across the patio and through the house. Moments later, Laura heard the front door slam and the convertible engine roar to life. Only then did she step out onto the patio, surveying the chaotic scene with satisfaction. Vanessa's champagne glass lay overturned, her cover-up abandoned on a lounge chair, the pool water still rippling from the disturbance. One of the caimans floated serenely near the surface, regarding Laura with ancient, impassive eyes. "Well done," she told it softly. An hour later, Paul came home in a state of agitation. Laura was sitting calmly in the living room reviewing documents for court. "Laura, did you see anything strange around the house today?" he demanded. She looked up, the picture of innocence. "Strange, no. Why?" Paul ran a hand through his hair, clearly flustered. "The pool, apparently. There are reptiles in it. Snakes and alligators. He caught himself, according to a neighbor who was walking by and saw them. Reptiles in our pool." Laura set aside her papers and stood, moving toward the patio doors with convincing concern. "That's impossible." Together, they went outside to the pool, which was now covered completely with the tarp that Laura had replaced after retrieving her aquatic actors. All evidence of Vanessa's panicked exit had been carefully removed. "I don't see anything unusual," Laura said, gesturing to the covered pool. "And why would a neighbor call you directly instead of coming to the door?" Paul faltered, caught in his lie. They must have my number from the neighborhood directory." "Let's take a look, shall we?" Laura moved to remove the tarp, knowing that the reptiles were now safely back in their containers in the garage, awaiting return to their owner. When they uncovered the pool, the water was clear and undisturbed. Paul stared at it in confusion. But they said, "Are you feeling all right, Paul?" Laura asked, placing a concerned hand on his arm. "You've been working such long hours lately. Maybe you're under too much stress." He shook his head, bewildered. "I guess it was a mistake. Why don't you go lie down? I'll bring you some tea." As Paul went upstairs, Laura returned the tarp to its place over the pool and took out her phone. She sent a text to Sophia, Phase 2 complete. Even better than expected. Sophia replied immediately. "Ready for Phase 3 whenever you are?" Laura smiled. Phase 3 was where everything would change, where her carefully orchestrated plan would shift from psychological warfare to legal devastation. For that, she needed Paul to make one critical mistake. Tuesday morning found Laura seated across from Sophia in her partner's office, the blinds drawn for privacy as they reviewed the growing file of evidence against Paul. "The financial evidence is compelling," Sophia said, tapping the bank statements showing Paul's secret transfers. "Judge Bennett takes a particularly dim view of hidden assets." Laura nodded. "What about the surveillance footage?" "Technically admissible, since it's your own property," Sophia confirmed, "but potentially problematic from a public relations standpoint. It could make you look vindictive." "I don't care how I look," Laura said firmly. "I care about justice." Sophia leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. "Laura, I understand your anger, but remember what we built with this firm. Your reputation matters, not just for your personal satisfaction in this divorce, but for your long-term career." Laura sighed, acknowledging the wisdom in her friend's words. "So, what's your recommendation?" "We focus on the financial misconduct primarily. It's cleaner, less emotional, and just as devastating. The affair provides context, but shouldn't be the centerpiece." "And the pool incidents," Sophia allowed herself a small smile. "Off the record, brilliant psychological warfare. On the record, we never discussed them." They spent the next 2 hours refining their strategy, preparing documents that would soon become the foundation of Laura's divorce filing. Unlike her original plan to trick Paul into signing away his assets, a strategy that might not hold up in court, they focused on documenting his financial deceptions and preparing to freeze his accounts once they filed. "There's one more thing," Laura said as they finished. "I need to meet with Judge Bennett before we file. Not to discuss the case specifically, but to ensure she's aware of certain contextual elements." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "That's walking a fine ethical line." "I know, but I need to make sure she understands that what follows isn't done out of vindictiveness. It's a response to a calculated betrayal." After leaving Sophia's office, Laura called Frank for an update on his latest surveillance. "Dr. Anderson met with Ms. Miller at the Westlake Hotel again yesterday," Frank reported. "But there's something new. After she left, he had another meeting with a real estate agent. They discussed vacation properties in Aspen, specifically a 3-bedroom condo priced at $2.1 million. Laura's grip tightened on her phone. "Did he make an offer?" "Not yet, but he requested paperwork to be prepared. The agent mentioned something about you and your future wife will love the mountain views." Future wife. The words hit Laura like a physical blow. Not only was Paul planning to leave her, he was already planning a life with Vanessa, a life funded by assets accumulated during their marriage. "There's more," Frank continued, hesitation evident in his voice. "I followed Ms. Miller yesterday evening. She met with another man at the Lakeshore restaurant, Dr. Robert Phillips from Mercy General Hospital. They appeared intimate." Laura wasn't surprised. Her investigation had already revealed Vanessa's pattern of pursuing wealthy, married men. "And Paul has no idea," None that I can detect. Keep watching both of them. I want to know every move. That evening, as Laura prepared dinner, an elaborate meal she had no intention of eating, but that maintained the facade of normalcy, she considered her next steps carefully. The pool incidents had been satisfying, but ultimately just preludes to the real performance, the legal and financial dismantling of Paul Anderson's carefully constructed life. When Paul arrived home, she noticed immediately that something was different. He seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and jumping when it buzzed with notifications. "Busy day?" she asked, setting a plate of perfectly seared salmon before him. Oh, yes, 2 valve replacements and a bypass. Successful. What? Oh, yes, all good outcomes. Laura studied him as he picked at his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. Was he worried about Vanessa's reaction to the pool incidents, concerned about his secret real estate plans, or was there something else, something she hadn't yet discovered? "Paul," she said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied lately." He startled slightly at her touch, then forced a smile. "Just work stress, end of quarter reporting, budget meetings, the usual administrative nonsense." Another lie, but this time Laura could see something new in his eyes, a flicker of what might have been guilt, or perhaps fear. Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder if his carefully constructed house of cards was beginning to collapse. "You know you can talk to me," she said, infusing her voice with convincing concern. "Whatever it is." For a moment, just a moment, she saw the old Paul, the man she had married, looking back at her with genuine emotion. Then it was gone, replaced by the guarded stranger who had been living in her house these past months. "I know," he said, squeezing her hand briefly before withdrawing. "But it's nothing, really, just tired." Laura nodded, accepting his evasion while noting the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his wine glass. Something had changed. Something had him rattled. After dinner, Paul retreated to his study, ostensibly to review patient files, but actually, according to the surveillance app on Laura's phone, to engage in a tense text exchange with Vanessa. Laura couldn't see the content of the messages, but the frequency and Paul's agitated expression suggested trouble in paradise. Perfect. By Wednesday, the strain was showing clearly on Paul's face. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally confident posture had diminished. Laura watched him with detached interest, like a scientist observing the effects of an experimental treatment. That morning, she had received an interesting report from Frank. Vanessa had been seen having lunch with Dr. Robert Phillips again, this time at an intimate cafe where they had engaged in what could only be described as romantic behavior. Meanwhile, Paul had been calling Vanessa repeatedly, with most calls going to voicemail. The pool incidents had clearly destabilized their relationship, introducing doubt and fear where there had been only excitement and lust before. But Laura knew better than to underestimate Vanessa's resilience or her greed. The younger woman wouldn't abandon her wealthy prize so easily, not unless something more compelling came along, or unless she believed Paul himself was behind the disturbing pool events. Laura decided it was time to accelerate her plan. Instead of waiting for Thursday, Vanessa's usual pool day, she would set a new trap for today. Not in the pool this time, but in Paul's email account, which Laura still had access to, thanks to a shared password he had never bothered to change. While Paul was in surgery, Laura composed an email from his account to Vanessa. "Vanessa, we need to talk about what's been happening at the house. Meet me at the pool today at 4:30. I've rescheduled my afternoon appointments." Paul simple, direct, and guaranteed to bring Vanessa to the house at a time when Paul would still be at the hospital and when Laura would be waiting. At 4:15, Laura positioned herself in the kitchen, with a clear view of the backyard but hidden from immediate sight. Right on schedule. Vanessa's red convertible pulled into the driveway at 4:28. This time, the personal trainer emerged looking markedly less confident than usual. She glanced around nervously as she approached the front door, hesitating before entering the security code. Laura watched through her surveillance app as Vanessa stepped cautiously into the foyer, calling out, "Paul, are you here?" when no answer came. She moved tentatively through the house toward the back patio, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her side as if it might provide some protection. The pool was uncovered today, its surface calm and inviting in the late afternoon sun. No reptiles, no amphibians, just clear, pristine water. Vanessa stood at the edge, visibly relieved at the normal appearance but still wary. That's when Laura stepped outside, closing the patio door behind her with a decisive click that made Vanessa whirl around. Startled. "Mrs. Anderson," Vanessa gasped, her perfectly tanned face draining of color. I was looking for Paul." "Yes, I know," Laura said calmly, moving closer. "But Paul isn't here. He's in surgery until 6. As I suspect you already know." Vanessa took a step backward, her calf bumping against one of the lounge chairs. "There must be some mistake. He asked me to meet him here." "No mistake," Laura smiled thinly, holding up her phone to display the email. "I sent that message from Paul's account. Careless of him to use such an obvious password. Don't you think his mother's maiden name and birth year? So predictable." Understanding dawned in Vanessa's eyes, quickly followed by fear. "The frogs, the reptiles, that was you." "Of course it was me," Laura confirmed, her voice steady and controlled. "Did you think our pool was spontaneously generating wildlife, or that some random prankster was targeting us specifically?" Vanessa seemed to gather herself, her fear transitioning to defensive anger. "Look, I don't know what Paul has told you, but—" "Paul hasn't told me anything," Laura interrupted. "He doesn't need to. I have cameras, Vanessa, throughout the house, including the bedroom and pool area. I've been watching you two for months." The color drained completely from Vanessa's face now. "You've been spying on us." "It's not spying when it's my own home," Laura corrected her. "It's security, protection of my property, which, incidentally, includes this house, this pool, and, at least for now, that husband you've been enjoying so thoroughly." Vanessa shifted her weight, clearly calculating her options. Laura could almost see the thoughts racing behind those blue eyes. Denial, confrontation, perhaps even an attempt at sympathy. "I never meant to hurt you," Vanessa finally said, opting for the sympathetic approach. "These things just happen sometimes." Laura laughed, a short, harsh sound devoid of humor. "No, Vanessa, affairs don't just happen. They're choices, a series of deliberate decisions to betray someone who trusted you." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But that's not even the most interesting part of this situation." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Vanessa, that you're not as exclusive with Paul as he believes. How is Dr. Phillips these days, still promising to leave his wife once his youngest finishes college?" Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. "How did you—" "I'm very thorough," Laura said simply. "It's what makes me such an effective attorney. I don't just gather evidence, I find patterns. And your pattern, Vanessa, is quite clear. Wealthy, married medical professionals who can provide the lifestyle you feel entitled to." Laura reached into her pocket and withdrew several photographs, surveillance shots of Vanessa with Dr. Phillips at restaurants, hotel entrances, even one particularly damning image of them kissing in his car. "Does Paul know about your backup plan?" Laura asked, her tone conversational now. "Or is Dr. Phillips your backup?" It's hard to keep track of your rotation. Vanessa's facade of sophistication completely crumbled. What do you want from me? Money. I don't have anything close to what you. I don't want your money. Laura cut her off. I want you gone. Out of my house, out of my pool, and out of my husband's life. That's not your decision to make, Vanessa shot back, finding a last reserve of defiance. That's between me and Paul. Laura smiled again, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. Actually, it is my decision, because I'm about to make Paul an offer he can't refuse: a clean, quiet divorce where he keeps his reputation and career intact, or a very public, very messy legal battle where everyone learns exactly what kind of man he really is. She stepped closer, forcing Vanessa to retreat until her back hit the edge of the pool. And as for you, I have enough evidence of your entrepreneurial approach to relationships to ensure that no wealthy, respectable man in this city will touch you again. One email to the hospital board about Dr. Phillips, copied to his wife, of course, should start the dominoes falling. Vanessa paled further. If that was possible. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. I destroy people in court for a living. Vanessa, did Paul never mention that? For a long moment, they stood facing each other, the polished, successful attorney in her prime, and the younger woman whose calculated plans were unraveling before her eyes. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice small. What happens now? Now you leave. You don't call Paul. You don't text him. You don't accidentally run into him at the gym. You disappear from his life as completely as if you never existed. And if I don't, Laura's expression hardened, then I release everything to his colleagues, to Dr. Phillips' wife, to the hospital board. I imagine your personal training business relies heavily on referrals from satisfied clients. How many do you think you'll retain once this becomes public? Vanessa seemed to deflate, her calculated seductiveness replaced by the uncertain young woman she actually was. He said he loved me, that we would have a life together after he left you. For the first time, Laura felt a flicker of genuine pity for Vanessa, not enough to change her course, but enough to recognize the familiar pattern: an older, powerful man making promises he had no intention of keeping to a younger woman who, despite her calculated approach, was still naive enough to believe him. He told me the same thing 7 years ago, Laura said, her voice softer now. Men like Paul don't change. Vanessa, they just find new audiences for the same performance. With that, she stepped aside, clearing a path to the house. You have exactly 5 minutes to collect whatever belongings you've left here and go. After that, anything remaining will be donated to Goodwill, including that tennis bracelet he bought you with our joint account. Vanessa hesitated only a moment before hurrying past Laura into the house. 4 minutes later, she emerged with her designer bag and a small collection of items: makeup, a phone charger, what looked like lingerie hastily stuffed into a side pocket. Laura watched impassively as Vanessa walked to her car, shoulders slumped in defeat as the red convertible backed out of the driveway. Laura felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a cold certainty that she was one step closer to reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Frank Doctor. A leaving hospital now. Heading your way. Laura nodded to herself. Perfect timing for the final confrontation. She moved back into the house and prepared herself, arranging a series of folders on the kitchen island, each one containing a different aspect of her case against Paul. Financial records showing his secret transfers, surveillance photos of him with Vanessa, property assessments of their home and other assets, the statement from their joint investment portfolio, and finally, divorce papers, already filled out with terms that would leave Paul with his personal possessions, his car, and whatever he'd managed to hide in his private accounts. Everything else: the house, the vacation property they'd purchased 3 years ago, the investment portfolio they'd built together, even his share of their medical building downtown would remain with Laura. By the time Paul's car pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later, Laura was seated calmly at the kitchen island, a glass of his favorite scotch poured and waiting beside the folders. Not for him, for her. A small symbolic gesture that didn't go unnoticed as Paul entered the kitchen and froze, taking in the scene before him. Something in her expression must have betrayed her knowledge because the color drained from his face before she spoke a single word. "Hello, Paul," Laura said, her voice dangerously soft. "We need to talk." Paul stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, his practiced confidence evaporating as he took in the scene before him, Laura seated calmly at the island, his favorite scotch in her hand, and several neatly arranged folders spread out in front of her. His eyes darted from the folders to her face, searching for some clue about what was happening. "Laura," he began, forcing a casual tone that didn't match his rigid posture. "What's all this evidence?" she replied simply, taking a deliberate sip of scotch. "Please, sit down." Paul remained standing, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the back of a kitchen chair. "Evidence of what? Your affair with Vanessa Miller," Laura said, her voice steady and clinical. "Your financial deceptions. Your plans to leave me for a younger woman while ensuring I wouldn't get my fair share of our assets." All color drained from Paul's face. "I don't know what you're—" "Stop!" Laura cut him off, raising a hand. "Don't insult both of us with denials. I have video surveillance of you and Vanessa in our home, in our bed, in our pool." She tapped one of the folders. "I have bank statements showing transfers to your secret account. I have receipts for jewelry I never received. And I have documentation of your conversations with a real estate agent about a property in Aspen for you and your future wife." Paul sank into the chair, his legs seemingly unable to support him any longer. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself," Laura corrected him. "After finding evidence of your infidelity, I took reasonable steps to document the extent of your betrayal, both emotional and financial." For a long moment, Paul sat in stunned silence, his eyes fixed on the folders that contained the detailed record of his duplicity. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its usual authoritative tone. "How long have you known long enough?" Laura replied, sliding one of the folders toward him. "This contains the timeline. 6 weeks of documented evidence, though the affair began earlier, I suspect." Paul opened the folder with trembling hands, paging through the meticulous notes Laura had compiled: dates, times, locations, photographs of Vanessa entering their home, using their pool, sleeping in their bed. His face grew ashen as he recognized the thoroughness of Laura's investigation. "The frogs," he whispered suddenly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The reptiles. That was you." Laura allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Who else would it have been? Did you think our pool was spontaneously generating wildlife?" "Why not just confront me when you first found out?" Paul asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. "Why go to all this trouble?" Laura studied him for a long moment, allowing herself to really see the man she had married, not the idealized version she had held in her heart for 7 years, but the deeply flawed human being sitting before her now. "Because you deserved consequences, Paul, not just the discomfort of being caught, but true, lasting consequences for your choices." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You brought another woman into our home, into our bed, while I was working to build a life for us. You lied to my face every day for months. You risked my health by sleeping with someone else without protection." She gestured to the documents spread across the island. "But most importantly, you underestimated me. You thought I was too busy, too trusting, or too stupid to notice what was happening right under my nose. That was your biggest mistake." Paul seemed to shrink further with each word. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "What happens now? Now you sign these," Laura said, placing a final folder before him and uncapping an expensive fountain pen, a gift she had given him on their 5th anniversary. Divorce papers, already filled out with the agreed-upon division of assets. Essentially, I keep everything, and you walk away with your personal possessions, your car, and whatever you've managed to hide in your private accounts. And if I refuse, Laura's smile was glacial. Then we go to court, where I present evidence not only of your adultery, but also of financial misconduct. I'll subpoena Vanessa as a witness and introduce surveillance footage showing her in our home at least 3 times a week for the past 4 months. I'll depose your colleagues at the hospital, who will have to testify under oath about your relationship with her. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. By the time I'm finished, your professional reputation will be in tatters. The hospital board will open an ethics investigation. Your private practice patients will find other cardiologists. And in the end, the court will award me everything anyway, plus attorney's fees. Paul stared at the divorce papers, the full weight of his situation crushing down on him. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "That's my job." Laura replied simply. "I plan for contingencies. I anticipate opponents' moves. I protect what's mine." Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky as a summer storm gathered strength. The symbolism wasn't lost on Laura, the inevitable breaking of tension after weeks of building pressure. Paul picked up the pen with a shaking hand. "Can I at least read them first?" "By all means," Laura said, gesturing graciously. "Take your time. Unlike you, I have nothing to hide." As Paul began to review the documents, his phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts. Laura knew without looking that they were from Vanessa, likely a frantic account of her encounter with Laura earlier. "You should answer her," Laura suggested mildly. "She seems quite upset." Paul ignored the phone, focusing instead on the divorce papers with growing dismay. "This is—" He paused, searching for words. "This is brutal, Laura." "No," she corrected him. "Brutal would be taking half and leaving you with half. This is justice." He continued reading, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted from shock to something approaching respect. "I never stood a chance, did I?" "Not from the moment you decided to betray me," Laura confirmed. "You married a strategist, Paul. You should have remembered that before you started playing games." With a deep sigh of resignation, Paul signed his name on every flagged line, effectively surrendering everything they had built together over 7 years of marriage. As he signed the final page, the skies opened up outside, rain lashing against the windows and sheets. Laura gathered the documents carefully, returning them to their folders. "I've arranged for you to stay at the Golden Pine Motel on Route 37. It's paid through the end of the month, which should give you time to find more permanent accommodations." Paul stared at her incredulously. "You're making me leave tonight in this storm." "Your clothes are already packed," she replied, gesturing to a suitcase by the front door that she had prepared earlier. "And yes, tonight, I see no reason to prolong this any further." The finality in her tone seemed to trigger something in Paul. His shock gave way to anger, color flooding back into his face. "You know what Vanessa was right about you. You're cold, calculating. No wonder I looked elsewhere." Laura refused to take the bait. "Is that the story you told yourself to justify sleeping with a woman 15 years younger? That I was cold? Interesting, considering I was the one who arranged every anniversary celebration, who remembered every birthday, who supported your career while building my own." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I gave you everything, Paul, my youth, my loyalty, my unwavering support. And in return, you gave me betrayal. Thunder crashed directly overhead, as if nature itself were punctuating her words. Paul flinched, his momentary anger deflating. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "I never meant for any of this to happen." That's the problem with choices, Paul. They have consequences whether you meant them or not. Laura stepped back, creating distance between them. "Now, please leave. Your key card won't work after midnight." As Paul gathered his suitcase and walked to the door, he paused, turning back with one final question. "What will you tell my mother?" Laura's expression softened slightly, the only crack in her otherwise perfect composure. "The truth, she deserves that much. We're having lunch tomorrow." Paul nodded, resignation etched in every line of his face. Without another word, he stepped out into the storm, hurrying to his car through the downpour. Laura watched from the window as he drove away, the red taillights of his sedan disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full weight of what had just transpired. She walked slowly to the living room and sank onto the sofa, emotion finally breaking through her carefully maintained facade. But the tears that slid down her cheeks weren't of sorrow or regret. They were of release, of endings and beginnings. After a few minutes, Laura wiped her eyes and pulled out her phone. She texted Sophia a simple message: "It's done. He signed everything." Sophia's reply came immediately. "You okay?" Laura considered the question. Was she okay? The marriage she had invested 7 years in was over. The man she had loved had betrayed her in the most painful way possible. The future she had planned would never come to pass. And yet, she felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. The worst had happened, and she had not only survived but emerged victorious. She had reclaimed her power, her home, her life. "I will be," she replied finally. "Tomorrow is a new day." The following afternoon, Laura met Martha Anderson at their favorite bistro downtown. The older woman had always been more mother to her than her own had been, and breaking the news was harder than Laura had anticipated. "He's been unfaithful," she said simply after they had ordered lunch. "For months now, with a personal trainer from his gym." Martha's face registered shock, then deep disappointment, but not. Laura noted disbelief. "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry." Martha reached across the table to clasp Laura's hand. "I was afraid something like this might happen. He's too much like his father sometimes." Laura hadn't known that Paul's father had been unfaithful. It was a detail Paul had never shared, despite the close relationship he claimed to have had with his deceased father. "I filed for divorce," Laura continued, keeping her voice steady. "Paul has already signed the papers." Martha's eyes widened. "That was quick." "I had compelling evidence," Laura explained, not wanting to delve into the surveillance details with her soon-to-be former mother-in-law, "and certain financial irregularities that made an extended legal battle inadvisable for Paul." Understanding dawned in Martha's wise eyes. "You went after him with everything you had, didn't you?" A ghost of a smile touched Laura's lips. "You know me too well." "He's my son, and I love him," Martha said slowly. "But he made his bed." She squeezed Laura's hand. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let what he did turn your heart to stone. You have too much to offer the world." Laura felt tears threatening again, not for Paul, but for the loss of this remarkable woman from her daily life. "I'll miss our lunches," she admitted. "Who says they have to end?" Martha replied firmly. "You became my daughter the day you married Paul. Divorce papers don't change that as far as I'm concerned." For the first time in weeks, Laura felt a genuine smile spread across her face. I'd like that. They spent the rest of lunch discussing Martha's plans to volunteer at a local literacy program and Laura's thoughts about taking on more pro bono work at the firm. Neither mentioned Paul again, a tacit agreement that their relationship existed independently of him now. As Laura drove home, she felt lighter than she had in months. The confrontation with Paul was behind her. The legal process was in motion. Her relationship with Martha remained intact. The future stretched before her, uncertain but full of possibility. That evening, as she walked through the house that was now truly hers alone, Laura found herself lingering in doorways, reassessing spaces that had been tainted by Paul and Vanessa's betrayal, the master bedroom where they had slept together, the shower they had shared, the pool, always the pool where their affair had blossomed. Laura knew many divorced women who had sold their marital homes, unable to live with the ghosts of failed relationships. But this house had been her dream before it became their reality. She had found the property, fallen in love with its potential, insisted on the pool that had become both the symbol of betrayal and the instrument of her revenge. No, she wouldn't sell. She would reclaim, reinvent, renew. Standing at the edge of the pool, illuminated now only by underwater lights that cast eerie blue patterns across the surface, Laura made a decision. The pool would be the first to change. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized with remarkable speed. Thanks to Paul's complete capitulation and Judge Bennett's efficiency, I assume Laura's firm representation of several prominent hospital board members had ensured that Paul's position remained secure, a small mercy Laura had decided to grant him, not out of forgiveness, but pragmatism. His continued employment meant continued alimony. After all, Frank's final report confirmed what Laura had suspected. Vanessa had indeed moved on. Now seen frequently with Dr. Robert Phillips, whose wife had recently filed for divorce. Paul, meanwhile, had rented a modest apartment near the hospital and seemed to be throwing himself into his work, his dating profile on several apps inactive despite being created. "Anything else you need from me?" Frank asked as they met for the last time in Laura's office. Laura shook her head. "You've been invaluable, Frank, but I think this chapter is closed." As she signed his final invoice, Laura felt a momentary pang of something like regret, not for the marriage, but for the person she had needed to become to end it. The cold strategist, the meticulous planner of another's downfall. It had been necessary, but it wasn't who she wanted to be going forward. "One last thing," Frank said as he prepared to leave. "The woman who's been calling your office, Megan Turner, she's legitimate victim of domestic financial abuse by her surgeon husband. Thought you might want to know." Laura nodded, making a mental note to have her assistant put the call through next time. Perhaps helping other women reclaim their power could be part of her path forward. As summer faded into fall, Laura threw herself into work and renewal. She took on 3 pro bono cases for women in financially abusive relationships. She sponsored a scholarship for female law students interested in family law. She began having regular dinners with Sophia and her husband, game nights with other friends she had neglected during her marriage, Sunday lunches with Martha, and she transformed her home, room by room. The master bedroom was completely redecorated, the bed replaced. The color scheme changed from the neutral tones Paul had preferred to rich jewel colors that made Laura feel alive. The kitchen was updated with the high-end appliances she had always wanted, but Paul had deemed unnecessary. The living room became a showcase for art by female artists. Pieces Laura selected not for investment value, but for how they made her feel when she looked at them. But the biggest transformation was yet to come. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Laura stood in her backyard, watching as workers completed the transformation of what had once been the swimming pool. In its place now stood a beautiful meditation garden, complete with a small koi pond, flowering plants, and a stone pathway. Sophia joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. It's beautiful, a perfect symbol of your fresh start. Laura nodded, taking in the peaceful scene. Out with the old, in with the new. Speaking of new, Sophia said hesitantly, have you heard about Paul? Only that he's taken a position at a small community hospital upstate, quite a step down from his prestigious cardiology practice. Vanessa left him, Sophia added. Apparently, living in a motel room while he tried to rebuild his life wasn't the glamorous affair she had signed up for. Laura found she felt nothing at this news, neither satisfaction nor pity. Paul had simply become a closed chapter in her life, a lesson learned and integrated. As the workers packed up their tools and departed, congratulating Laura on her new garden, she felt a strange sensation in her stomach, a fluttering that had nothing to do with anxiety or relief. She had been feeling it for a few days now, but had attributed it to stress, to the emotional upheaval of the past months. But standing here, watching the completion of her garden, a different possibility suddenly presented itself. Laura, Sophia was looking at her with concern. You've gone pale. Are you all right? I'm fine, Laura assured her, though her mind was racing through calculations. When was her last period, 6 weeks ago, 7? She had been so consumed with the divorce proceedings, the house renovations, her new cases, that she hadn't noticed. Actually, she amended, I think I need to sit down for a minute. They moved to the stone bench that had been installed beside the koi pond. Laura took a deep breath, staring at the champagne glass in her hand, a drink she suddenly realized she shouldn't be having if her suspicion was correct. What is it? Sophia pressed, genuine worry in her eyes. You can tell me anything. You know that. Laura placed the untouched champagne on the bench beside her. I think I might be pregnant. Sophia's eyes widened. Are you sure? No, Laura admitted, but it would explain some things I've been feeling and the timing. She trailed off, mentally counting back. It would have to be Paul's, from before I discovered the affair. Sophia was silent for a moment, processing this revelation. How do you feel about that possibility? It was the question Laura had been asking herself since the realization struck. How did she feel about carrying Paul's child, about becoming a mother now, alone, in the wake of such betrayal? I always wanted children, she said slowly. We kept delaying because of Paul's career, then mine, and then it was too late for us as a couple. She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the flat surface that might soon be changing. If I am pregnant, I think I would welcome it, not because it's Paul's, but because it's mine. A new beginning. Sophia squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I'm here for you. We all are. After Sophia left, Laura remained in the garden as dusk settled, watching the koi fish glide serenely through the water of their pond. One particularly large specimen, a beautiful copper and white butterfly koi, surfaced near her feet, its mouth opening and closing as if greeting her. Hello there, she said softly. Enjoying your new home? The fish circled once more before diving deeper into the pond. Laura smiled, her hand still resting on her stomach, imagining the life that might be growing there. The next morning, she bought a pregnancy test on her way to the office. At lunch, she locked herself in her private bathroom and followed the instructions with the same meticulous attention she gave to legal documents. 2 minutes later, she had her answer. Positive. Laura sat on the edge of her bathtub, staring at the plastic stick in her hand, emotions washing over her in waves. Joy, fear, determination, and something else of fierce, protective love for the tiny life inside her. A life that had begun in the midst of betrayal, but would be raised in strength and honesty. Her first decision was easy. She would keep the baby. Her second decision took more consideration. Would she tell Paul legally? He had rights. Morally, he had responsibilities. But personally, did she want him involved in her child's life? Given what she now knew about his character, Laura decided to wait before making that decision. The pregnancy was still very early. There would be time to consider all angles, to consult with Sophia and perhaps Judge Harris about the legal ramifications, to prepare herself for whatever path she chose. For now, she would focus on her health, on creating the best possible environment for her baby to grow. She made an appointment with an OB/GYN for the following week and downloaded several pregnancy apps to her phone. That evening, as Laura sat beside her koi pond, watching the fish swim lazy circles in the twilight, she felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The transformation was complete, not just of the yard, but of herself. Where there had once been a swimming pool that symbolized a shared life built on deception, there was now a garden of her own creation. Where there had once been a wife who trusted blindly, there was now a woman who stood firmly in her power. And where there had once been emptiness, there was now new life growing. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Laura made a silent promise to her unborn child. She would never again surrender her strength, her intelligence, or her self-worth to anyone. The lesson had been painful, but the wisdom gained was invaluable. She had survived betrayal not by becoming a victim, but by becoming a force of nature, as unstoppable and inevitable as the summer storm that had raged the night she reclaimed her life. And in that transformation lay her true victory. Laura Anderson rose from the bench and walked back toward her house, hers alone now, in every sense of the word. Behind her, the garden glowed softly in the evening light, a living testament to the truth she had learned that endings, even painful ones, could become beautiful beginnings if you had the courage to transform them. She placed her hand on her stomach once more, feeling the promise of the future within her. "We're going to be just fine," she whispered to the child she already loved beyond measure. "Better than fine. We're going to be extraordinary."